The boy collapsed through the garage door, his small body shaking so violently he could barely breathe. Blood dripped from his knees where he'd fallen running. "Please!" he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "Please, save my grandmother, she's dying!" The bikers froze, every wrench dropped. Every engine went silent. Marcus grabbed the boy's shoulders. "Who hurt her?" The child's face twisted with terror tears and snot mixing on his cheeks. "Her son," he choked out. "My uncle. He locked her in the cellar 4 days ago. She stopped answering me this morning. I think she's already dead." Before we continue, subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Lucas Bennett was only 8 years old, but he understood fear better than most adults ever would. He stood at the edge of the Iron Guardian's garage, his chest heaving, his sneakers covered in mud from running the 4 blocks from his grandmother's house. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. The men inside the garage were big, tattooed, rough-looking. The kind of men his grandmother had always told him to stay away from. But Lucas didn't have anywhere else to go. "Hey, kid." A man with a gray beard and thick arms stepped forward, wiping grease from his hands. "You okay?" Lucas opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a sob that ripped through his whole body. The man crouched down, his eyes softening. "Easy. Take a breath. What's wrong?" "My grandma," Lucas finally choked out. "Please, you have to help her." "Help her? How? What happened?" "He locked her in the cellar." Lucas's voice cracked. "She can't get out. She's sick. She needs her medicine. Please, you have to come. Please." The garage went quiet. Every man stopped what they were doing. The gray-bearded man exchanged a look with the others, then turned back to Lucas. "Who locked her in there, son?" Lucas's chin trembled. "Her son. My Uncle Vincent." The man's jaw tightened. "Her own son did this." Lucas nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. 4 days ago. He said if she didn't stay quiet, he'd send me away. He said nobody would believe us. But she's getting worse. I heard her coughing all night. She couldn't catch her breath this morning. I think she's dying. The man stood slowly. His name was Marcus Sullivan, and he'd seen a lot of terrible things in his 53 years. But something about this boy's face, the raw terror in his eyes, cut through everything. "Danny," Marcus said without looking away from Lucas. "Cole. With me." 2 men stepped forward immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Marcus put his hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Show us." Lucas ran ahead of them, glancing back every few seconds to make sure they were still following. His legs burned, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't, not when every minute might be the difference between his grandmother living or dying. The house came into view. A small 2-story with peeling paint and a sagging porch. It had looked better once, back when his grandfather was alive, back when the garden was full of flowers and the windows were always clean. Now it looked tired, broken, like everything inside it. Lucas stopped at the front door, his hand hovering over the knob. "He's not here," he said quickly. "He left this morning. He always leaves during the day." Marcus nodded. "Where's the cellar door?" "Inside, in the hallway." They entered the house, and Marcus immediately noticed the smell. Stale food, something sour underneath it. The air felt wrong, heavy with neglect, and something darker. Lucas led them down a narrow hallway to a door secured with a padlock on the outside. A padlock on a cellar door, inside a home. Marcus felt his stomach turn. "How long has she been down there?" Danny asked, his voice tight. 4 days, Lucas whispered. I've been bringing her water through the crack under the door, and crackers when I could find them. But it's not enough. She's so weak. Cole already had a tool in his hand. He worked the lock for less than 15 seconds before it clicked open. Marcus pushed the door wide, and a rush of cold, damp air hit them. Mrs. Bennett, Marcus called down into the darkness. Ma'am, we're coming down. We're here to help. Silence. Then faintly, a cough. They descended the stairs slowly. The cellar was dim, lit only by a single bare bulb that cast more shadows than light. The concrete floor was cold. The walls were bare, and in the far corner, huddled on a thin mattress with nothing but a worn blanket wrapped around her shoulders, was Eleanor Bennett. She looked up at them with eyes that had seen too much. Her face was pale, almost gray. Her white hair hung loose and tangled around her face. When she tried to sit up, her arms shook so badly she nearly collapsed. Who? Her voice was barely a whisper, raw from coughing and crying and calling for help that never came. We're friends, ma'am, Marcus said gently, crouching beside her. Your grandson came to us. We're going to get you out of here. Eleanor's gaze shifted past him to the stairs where Lucas stood, frozen tears still streaming down his face. Lucas. Her voice broke on his name. Oh, sweetheart. You shouldn't have. He'll be so angry. I don't care, Lucas said, his small voice suddenly fierce. I don't care what he does. You couldn't breathe, Grandma. I heard you last night. You were crying. Eleanor's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. Don't apologize, Marcus said firmly. None of this is your fault. Can you stand? She tried, but her legs wouldn't hold her. 4 days without proper food, without her heart medication, without sunlight or fresh air, her body had nothing left to give. I've got you. Marcus lifted her carefully, cradling her like she weighed nothing. She was so thin, so fragile. The bones of her shoulders pressed against his arms. They carried her up the stairs and into the living room. Cole found a blanket to wrap around her while Danny checked the rest of the house. Lucas stayed close to his grandmother's side, holding her hand like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. Water? Eleanor whispered. Please. Lucas ran to the kitchen and came back with a glass. He held it to her lips, helping her drink slowly. His hands were still shaking, but his grip was steady. When did you last take your medication? Marcus asked. 4 days ago. He took it. He took everything. Marcus's jaw clenched. What do you mean, everything? Eleanor closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with a pain that went far deeper than physical. He came back 6 months ago, after my husband died. Said he wanted to help me. Said he'd take care of the bills, the accounts, everything. Her voice wavered. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. He's my son. What happened? Marcus pressed gently. At first it seemed fine, but then money started disappearing. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. When I asked him about it, he said I was confused, that I was forgetting things. He made me feel like I was losing my mind. She paused, her breathing ragged. A few weeks ago, I checked the account myself. $28,000. Gone. Everything my husband and I saved. When I confronted him, She stopped, her hand moving unconsciously to her arm. Marcus noticed the bruises, fading now but unmistakable. Fingerprints pressed into her skin. He grabbed you, Marcus said quietly. Eleanor nodded, her eyes filling with tears. He said if I told anyone, he'd have me declared incompetent. He said he'd put me in a home where no one would visit. And he said... She looked at Lucas, and her voice broke completely. He said Lucas would go to foster care, that I'd never see him again. Lucas's face went white. Grandma, you never told me that. I couldn't. She squeezed his hand. I couldn't let you be scared. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I just let him have what he wanted, he'd leave you alone. But he didn't leave you alone, Marcus said. He locked you in the cellar. 4 days ago, I told him I was going to call the police, that I'd found proof of what he'd done. That's when he... She couldn't finish. That's when he dragged you downstairs and locked the door, Danny said from the doorway, his voice hard. I found where he cut the phone lines, took her cell phone too. Marcus stood slowly. He looked at Eleanor, then at Lucas, then back at Eleanor. The boy was 8 years old. He'd spent 4 days listening to his grandmother suffer, sneaking her water and crackers, terrified of what would happen if his uncle found out. And today, when he couldn't stand it anymore, he'd walked into a garage full of strangers and begged for help. That took courage, the kind of courage most grown men never found. He's coming back, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded. He always comes back, usually in the evening, after he's been drinking. Marcus turned to Cole. Call the others. I want people here before he shows up. Cole was already pulling out his phone. Within 2 hours, the house looked different. Not in any visible way. The furniture was the same, the walls unchanged, but the energy had shifted. 3 more bikers had arrived, positioning themselves where they could see every entrance. They didn't crowd Eleanor or make her uncomfortable. They just watched. Waited. Lucas sat on the floor beside his grandmother's chair, his head resting against her knee. Eleanor stroked his hair with trembling fingers, the way she used to when he was smaller, before everything fell apart. You should eat something, Marcus said, setting a plate in front of her. One of the men had made a run for groceries. Real food, not the stale crackers Lucas had been stealing from the kitchen. I'm not hungry. I know. Eat anyway. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, then picked up the fork. Her first bite was hesitant, but by the third she was eating steadily, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You don't know us. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat across from her. Your grandson walked 4 blocks to ask for help. He didn't know us either. But he came anyway because he was out of options and he loved you more than he was afraid. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. He's all I have left. Then let us make sure you're both safe. You don't understand. Vincent, he wasn't always like this. When he was young, he was kind. He was a good boy. But after his father and I divorced after he went to live with his dad, she shook her head. Something broke in him. I tried to fix it. For 30 years I tried to fix it. Some things can't be fixed, Marcus said. Some people don't want to be fixed. He's still my son. And you're still his mother. That didn't stop him from locking you in a cellar and leaving you to die. The words were harsh, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She'd been thinking the same thing for 4 days alone in the dark, wondering if this was how it would end. I keep thinking about what I did wrong, she said softly. Where I failed him. You didn't fail him. He failed you. Before Eleanor could respond, Lucas lifted his head. His eyes were fixed on the window, his body suddenly tense. Someone's coming. Marcus stood and moved to the window. A car was pulling into the driveway, headlights cutting through the early evening darkness. That's him, Eleanor whispered. That's Vincent. Marcus looked at Danny, who was already moving toward the front door. Cole positioned himself near the kitchen. The others spread out, silent and ready. Stay here, Marcus told Eleanor. Both of you. Don't move. Lucas grabbed his grandmother's hand. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to hide. Not anymore. Vincent Bennett walked through his mother's front door like he owned it. He was 45 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, but there was something soft about him, something that had gone to seed. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, and the smell of alcohol preceded him like a warning. He stopped when he saw the men standing in the living room. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus stood near the window, arms crossed. Danny was by the front door. Cole leaned against the wall near the stairs. None of them moved. "We're friends of your mother," Marcus said. Vincent's face twisted. He looked past Marcus to where Eleanor sat in her chair, Lucas pressed against her side. "You." His voice was sharp, accusing. "You called someone, you brought strangers into my house." "It's not your house," Eleanor said. Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it that hadn't been there before. Something that sounded almost like strength. "It's mine. Harold left it to me. It's always been mine." Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're confused again, Mom. You know you can't trust your memory anymore." "My memory is fine." Eleanor's hands were trembling, but she didn't look away. "I remember everything. The money you stole, the lies you told, the way you grabbed me when I tried to fight back. I never... $28,000, Vincent. I saw the bank statements. I know exactly where it went." Vincent's expression flickered. For just a moment, something like fear crossed his face. Then it hardened into rage. "You don't know what you're talking about. I was helping you, taking care of things you couldn't handle anymore." "You were drinking it away," Eleanor said. "I could smell it on you every day. I found the bottles you tried to hide." "That's not... And when I threatened to tell someone, you locked me in the cellar." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. 4 days, Vincent. 4 days with no food, no medicine, no way to call for help. I could have died down there." Vincent's face flushed red. "I was protecting you. You were going to ruin everything. Make accusations that weren't true. I had to..." "You had to what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice cold. "Keep her quiet. Make sure nobody found out what you really are." Vincent spun toward him. "This is none of your business. She's my mother. This is a family matter." "Family doesn't lock each other in cellars," Danny said from the doorway. "Family doesn't steal from their own mother," Cole added. "Family doesn't threaten an 8-year-old boy with foster care to keep him quiet," Marcus finished. Vincent went still. His eyes darted to Lucas, who was staring at him with an expression that was equal parts fear and fury. "You told them..." Vincent's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You little... don't." Marcus stepped forward, and the single word stopped Vincent cold. "Don't say another word to that boy. Don't look at him. Don't even think about him." Vincent's hands curled into fists. "You can't tell me what to do in my own..." "It's not your house," Eleanor said again, and this time her voice was steady. "It stopped being your house the moment you locked me in that cellar." Vincent stared at her. Something shifted in his face. Humiliation, maybe, or the sudden realization that he'd lost control of a situation he thought he owned. "You're making a mistake," he said. "All of you. You think these bikers care about you? They're using you. When they're gone, I'll be the only one left. And then..." "Then what?" Marcus asked quietly. Vincent didn't answer, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that Vincent had to look up to meet his eyes. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Tonight. Right now. You're not going to come back. You're not going to call. You're not going to contact your mother or her grandson in any way. Yeah, you can't..." "I'm not finished." Marcus's voice didn't rise, but it cut through everything else. "If you come back, we'll be here. If you threaten them again, we'll know. And if anything happens to either of them, anything at all, we'll find you." Vincent's jaw worked. He looked around the room, counting the men, calculating the odds. Whatever he saw in their faces made his shoulders sag. "Fine," he spat. Fine. You want her, take her. She's nothing but a burden anyway. Always has been. Eleanor flinched like she'd been struck. Get out, Marcus said. Vincent turned and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the knob, looking back at his mother one last time. You'll regret this, he said. All of you. Then he was gone. The sound of his car starting echoed from the driveway. A moment later, the engine faded into the distance, and the house fell silent. Eleanor sat very still for a long moment. Then her shoulders began to shake, and the tears she'd been holding back finally broke free. Lucas climbed into her lap, wrapping his arms around her neck. It's okay, Grandma. It's okay. He's gone. I'm sorry, Eleanor sobbed. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I should have stopped him. I should have protected you. You did protect me. You stayed strong for 4 days. That's why I knew I had to be strong too. Marcus watched them hold each other, and something in his chest twisted. He'd seen a lot of pain in his life, a lot of cruelty. But watching this woman apologize to her grandson for being victimized, that was something else entirely. He's going to come back, Marcus said quietly to Danny. Men like him don't give up that easy. Danny nodded. I know. What do you want to do? Marcus looked at Eleanor, and Lucas still wrapped in each other's arms. The boy who'd walked 4 blocks to save his grandmother. The woman who'd endured 4 days of hell to protect her grandson. We stay, Marcus said, as long as it takes. That night, after Lucas had finally fallen asleep on the couch with his head in Eleanor's lap, she looked up at Marcus with exhausted eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. But I do. You don't understand. I thought, she paused, her voice breaking. I thought I was going to die down there. I thought no one would ever know what happened. I thought Lucas would be alone. He's not alone. Neither are you. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Why did you help us, really? Marcus was quiet for a while. Then he said, a long time ago, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. I promised myself if I ever got the chance, I'd do the same. And this is you keeping that promise. This is me remembering what it feels like to have no one in your corner. Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears. He's a good boy, Lucas. He's been through so much, but he's still good. I know. That's why I'm here. She reached out and squeezed his hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. Thank you, Marcus. He nodded once. Get some rest. We'll be here. Eleanor closed her eyes, her hand still resting on Lucas's head. For the first time in 4 days, her breathing was steady. For the first time in 6 months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Safe. But outside in a parking lot 3 blocks away, Vincent Bennett sat in his car with his phone pressed to his ear. I need your help, he said, his voice tight with humiliation and rage. Some bikers think they can push me around. I need people. Tonight. He listened to the response, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'll send you the address. He ended the call and stared at his mother's house through the rearview mirror. The lights were still on. He could see shadows moving behind the curtains. They thought they'd won. They thought he'd just walk away. They had no idea what he was capable of. Before we continue, from which city and country are you watching? Stories like this reach farther than we imagine. The first sign of trouble came just after midnight. Marcus was sitting by the window when he heard it, the low rumble of engines moving slow, too slow for anyone just passing through. He stood and looked out into the darkness. Headlights appeared at the end of the street. One vehicle, then another. Danny, Marcus said quietly. Danny was already on his feet. I see them. Cole moved to the back door. Big Ray, who'd arrived an hour earlier, positioned himself near the stairs. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Lucas stirred on the couch, lifting his head from Eleanor's lap. "What's happening?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "Go back to sleep." But Lucas didn't lie back down. He sat up slowly, his eyes fixed on the window. "He's back, isn't he?" Marcus looked at the boy. 8 years old, and he already knew that monsters didn't stay away just because you asked them to. "Stay with your grandmother." Eleanor's hand found Lucas's and gripped it tight. Her face had gone pale again, all the color she'd regained over the past few hours draining away. "He brought people," she whispered. "He always said he had friends. Dangerous friends." "So do we." The vehicle stopped in the middle of the street. Marcus counted 4 men climbing out of the first truck, 3 more from the car behind it. Vincent emerged last, his movements jerky with anger and alcohol. "Marcus." Danny's voice was tense. "That's more than I expected. Call the others." "Already did. 10 minutes out." "We don't have 10 minutes. Marcus walked to the front door and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cold, biting at his skin. He could see Vincent standing behind his hired muscle, pointing at the house, gesturing wildly. "You've got 1 chance to leave," Marcus called out. "Take it." One of the men laughed. He was big, easily 6'4", with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck. "You hear this guy thinks he's tough." "I'm not tough," Marcus said. "I'm just old enough to know what happens next if you don't walk away." Vincent pushed forward, his face twisted with rage. "That's my house, my mother. You can't keep me from my own family. Your family." Marcus's voice was steady, but there was ice underneath it. "You locked your mother in a cellar for 4 days. You stole everything she had. You threatened to put her grandson in foster care. That's not family. That's abuse. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so do you. That's why you brought 7 strangers to do what you're too weak to do yourself." Vincent's face went red. "Get him." The big man with the shaved head moved first. He took 3 steps toward the porch before Danny stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path. "Don't." The man hesitated. He looked Danny up and down, calculating. Danny wasn't as big, but there was something in his stance, something in his eyes that gave the bigger man pause. "There's 2 of you," the man said. 7 of us. "Can you count?" a voice said from behind them. Cole stepped around the corner of the house. Big Ray appeared from the other side. 2 more bikers emerged from parked vehicles down the street, reinforcements that had arrived without anyone noticing. The odds had shifted. 7 against 6. Not the overwhelming advantage Vincent had promised. "This isn't what you said." The big man turned to Vincent. "You said there'd be 2, maybe 3. It doesn't matter how many there are, just, it matters to me." The man took a step back. "I'm not getting arrested for whatever this is. I'm paying you. Not enough for this." The man turned and walked back to his truck. 2 others followed. Then a third. Vincent watched them go, his face cycling through disbelief, then fury, then something that looked almost like panic. "You can't leave. We had a deal." No one answered. Engines started. Headlights flared. Within 2 minutes, 5 of the 7 men had driven away, leaving Vincent and 2 others standing alone in the street. Marcus stepped off the porch. "Looks like your army just deserted." Vincent's remaining allies exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a wiry man with a scraggly beard, cleared his throat. "Vinny, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Vincent's voice was shaking now. "Shut up and let me think." "There's nothing to think about," Marcus said. "It's over. You lost. Go home." "I am home?" "No, you're not. Not anymore." For a long moment, no one moved. Vincent stood in the middle of the street, his chest heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked at the house at the window, where his mother's pale face was barely visible, and something in him seemed to crack. "This isn't finished," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, but you haven't. She's my mother. That boy is my family. You can't protect them forever." Marcus walked toward him, stopping only when they were face to face. "I don't have to protect them forever. I just have to protect them long enough for you to realize you've already lost everything that mattered." Vincent's jaw worked. His eyes were wild, darting between Marcus and the bikers surrounding him. For one terrible second, it looked like he might swing. Then the wiry man grabbed his arm. "Vinny, let's go. This isn't worth it." Vincent shrugged him off violently. "Don't touch me." But he stepped back. One step, then another. His eyes never left Marcus's face. "You'll regret this," he said. "All of you. Every single one of you." He turned and walked back to his car. The remaining two men followed, almost running in their haste to leave. Doors slammed, an engine roared to life, and then they were gone. The street fell silent. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Eleanor was standing in the doorway, clutching the frame for support. Lucas was beside her, his small hand wrapped around hers. "Is it over?" Eleanor asked. "For tonight?" "He'll come back. He always comes back. And we'll be here when he does." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why do you keep doing this? You don't owe us anything." Marcus looked at her, then at Lucas, then back at her. 8 hours ago, your grandson walked into my garage and asked for help. He didn't know me. He didn't know if I'd listen. But he came anyway because he loved you more than he was scared. That's not something I can walk away from." Eleanor couldn't speak. She just nodded, her whole body trembling. "Come inside," Marcus said gently. "It's cold out here." The next few hours passed in uneasy silence. Lucas finally fell asleep again, this time in his grandmother's bed, with Eleanor lying beside him, her arms wrapped around him like she was afraid he'd disappear. Marcus sat in the living room with Danny and Cole, speaking in low voices. "He's not done," Danny said. "You saw his face. He's not going to stop." "I know. So what do we do?" Marcus thought about that. Vincent was desperate, angry, and humiliated. That made him dangerous, but it also made him predictable. "We document everything," Marcus said. "Every threat, every attempt to contact them. We get Eleanor to file for a restraining order first thing in the morning, and we start digging into his finances." His finances? He stole $28,000 from his own mother. That's not just cruel, it's criminal. If we can prove it, he goes to jail. Cole leaned forward. "You think we can prove it?" "I think Eleanor has bank statements. I think she has records of every transaction he made. And I think once we start looking, we're going to find a lot more than just theft." Danny nodded slowly. "What about the kid?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "What about him?" "He's seen everything. 4 days of his grandmother locked in a cellar, his uncle threatening to send him away, armed men showing up in the middle of the night. That's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone an 8-year-old. He's stronger than you think." "I'm not saying he's not strong. I'm saying he needs more than protection. He needs someone to help him process all this." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "One thing at a time. First we make sure they're safe. Then we figure out the rest." Morning came slowly. The first light of dawn crept through the windows, turning the shadows gray, then gold. Eleanor woke to find Lucas still beside her, his breathing soft and even. She lay there for a long moment, watching him sleep, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the flutter of his eyelashes. 4 days ago, she'd thought she would never see him again. She'd lain in that cellar listening to her own heartbeat slow, wondering if anyone would find her body, wondering what would happen to Lucas when she was gone. But she wasn't gone. She was here. And so was he. She pressed a kiss to his forehead and slipped out of bed, moving quietly so she wouldn't wake him. Marcus was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He looked up when she entered. "How do you feel?" Eleanor considered the question. Her body ached. Her chest felt tight. But underneath all of that, there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. "Alive," she said. "I feel alive." Marcus nodded and poured her a cup of coffee. "We need to talk about next steps." "I know. The restraining order is just the beginning. We need to go to the police, file a formal report. Everything he did, the theft, the imprisonment, the threats, it all needs to be on record." Eleanor's hands trembled as she wrapped them around the warm cup. "And then what?" "Then we wait. The police will investigate. If we're lucky, they'll arrest him before he can cause any more damage. And if we're not lucky," Marcus met her eyes, "then we handle it ourselves." There was no threat in his voice, no bravado, just a simple statement of fact. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I never wanted this. He's my son. Despite everything, he's still my son." "I know. When he was little, he used to follow me everywhere. He'd hold my hand when we crossed the street. He'd bring me flowers from the garden just because he knew I loved them." Her voice cracked. "What happened to that boy?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "But that boy isn't the man who locked you in a cellar. You can mourn who he used to be, but you can't let who he's become destroy you." Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're right. I know you're right. It's just hard. The hardest things usually are." Lucas appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Grandma!" Eleanor opened her arms, and he ran to her, burying his face against her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice muffled. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm okay. I had a bad dream. I dreamed he came back and you were gone." Eleanor held him tighter. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." "You can't promise that. You couldn't promise it before." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Because he was right. She hadn't been able to protect him before. She'd let Vincent's threats keep her silent, keep her compliant, keep her trapped. "You're right," she said softly. "I couldn't promise it before. But things are different now. We have people helping us. We're not alone anymore." Lucas pulled back and looked at her. His eyes were too old for his face. "What if they leave? What if they get tired of helping? Then we'll figure it out together. You and me, the way we always have." "But you were locked in the cellar. You couldn't figure that out." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, I couldn't. And I'm so sorry, Lucas. I'm so sorry you had to be the one to save me." "I'm not sorry." His voice was fierce now, the same fierceness she'd heard last night when he'd told her he didn't care what Vincent did. "I'm glad I did it. I'd do it again." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "When did you get so brave?" "I'm not brave. I was scared the whole time." "That's what brave is, sweetheart. Being scared and doing it anyway." Marcus watched them from across the room. He thought about his own childhood, about the things he'd seen and done before he'd found his way to something better. He thought about the people who'd helped him when no one else would. And he thought about what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. "Hey, Lucas," he said. The boy looked up and, "You did good. What you did coming to find us, that took guts. Don't let anyone tell you different." Lucas's chin trembled. "I was just scared for my grandma." "I know. That's what made it brave. An hour later, Sergeant Maria Reyes arrived at the house. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Eleanor at ease. "Mrs. Bennet, I understand you have a lot to tell me." "Yes," Eleanor said. "I do." They sat in the living room while Eleanor recounted everything. The financial abuse, the threats, the imprisonment, the 4 days in the cellar with no food, no medication, no way to call for help. The things Vincent had said to Lucas. Sergeant Reyes took careful notes, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "Do you have documentation, bank statements? Anything that shows the missing money?" "I have everything. I've been keeping records for months. I just didn't know what to do with them." "I'll need copies of all of it." "Of course." Sergeant Reyes looked at Lucas, who was sitting beside his grandmother. "And you, young man, you're the one who went for help." Lucas nodded. "That was very brave. Can you tell me what you saw?" Lucas glanced at Eleanor, who squeezed his hand encouragingly. Then, in a small but steady voice, he told the sergeant everything. The night Vincent dragged Eleanor to the cellar. The sounds of crying through the floorboards. The mornings he'd snuck water and crackers through the crack under the door. By the time he finished, Sergeant Reyes's jaw was tight. "We're going to file a report," she said, "and I'm going to recommend charges: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment." "Child endangerment?" Eleanor asked. "Threatening an 8-year-old with foster care to keep him quiet counts." Sergeant Reyes's voice was hard. "What your son did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal." For a moment, Eleanor couldn't speak. Part of her had still been hoping, still been praying that somehow this wasn't as bad as it seemed. That maybe there was an explanation she'd missed. But there wasn't. There was just Vincent and what he'd done, and the wreckage he'd left behind. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "Now we build a case. I'll need to interview witnesses, review documents, coordinate with the prosecutor's office. In the meantime, I strongly recommend a restraining order. I can help you file one today." "Will it stop him?" Sergeant Reyes hesitated. "It's a legal tool, Mrs. Bennet. It gives us grounds to arrest him if he violates it. But I won't lie to you, a piece of paper doesn't stop someone determined to cause harm." "I know," Eleanor said quietly. "That's why they're here." She gestured to Marcus and the other bikers. Sergeant Reyes looked at them for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good. Keep them close." So, after Sergeant Reyes left, Marcus gathered everyone in the living room. "We got lucky last night," he said. "Vincent's hired help scattered as soon as they saw the odds weren't in their favor. But that won't happen again. Next time he'll come with people who don't care about odds." "So what do we do?" Danny asked. "We set up a rotation. Someone here at all times. We document everything, every car that passes, every phone call, every suspicious movement. And we reach out to some friends who might be able to help with the financial investigation." "What kind of friends? The kind who know how to dig?" Eleanor looked at him. "You're not just talking about protecting us anymore, are you?" "Protection is part of it," Marcus admitted. "But men like Vincent, they don't stop because you ask them to. They stop when they face consequences. Real consequences. And I intend to make sure he faces them." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" "Everything. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence you have. And I need you to be prepared to testify if it comes to that. Against my own son. Against the man who locked you in a cellar and left you to die." The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a resolve that hadn't been there before. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Whatever you need." 3 blocks away, Vincent Bennet sat in a dingy motel room staring at his phone. His head was pounding, His hands were shaking. The bottle of whiskey on the nightstand was already half empty. He'd failed. He'd brought 7 men with him, and they'd scattered like cockroaches the moment things got difficult. Now his mother had the police involved. Now there were bikers watching her house around the clock. Now everything he'd built was crumbling around him. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you had some trouble last night. Maybe I can help." Vincent stared at the message. Then he typed back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "Someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Meet me at the abandoned warehouse on 5th Street. Tonight. 10 p.m. Come alone." Vincent's hand trembled as he read the words. This could be a trap. This could be worse than a trap. But what choice did he have? He typed 2 letters and hit send. Okay. Then he reached for the whiskey and drank until the shaking stopped. Vincent arrived at the warehouse 15 minutes early. His hands were still shaking, but the whiskey had dulled the edge of his fear. He parked his car behind a dumpster and sat there watching, waiting. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black sedan pulled into the lot. A man stepped out tall and lean, dressed in a dark coat that seemed to swallow the light around him. He moved like someone who had never been afraid of anything in his life. "Vincent Bennett." The man's voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "Who's asking?" "A friend." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You can call me Mr. Cross." Vincent climbed out of his car, keeping his distance. "How do you know my name?" "I know a lot of things. I know you've been having trouble with some bikers. I know your mother filed a police report this morning. And I know you're running out of options." Vincent's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "The same thing you want. To solve your problem." Mr. Cross took a step closer. "Those bikers, they think they're untouchable. They think they can interfere in other people's business without consequences. I'd like to show them they're wrong." "Why do you care about bikers?" "Let's just say we have history. The Iron Guardians have caused problems for some associates of mine. This seems like an opportunity to return the favor." Vincent studied the man's face, looking for deception. "What are you offering?" "Resources. Manpower. The kind of people who don't run away when things get difficult." Mr. Cross smiled again. "All I need from you is information. Where they're stationed, how many there are, when they change shifts. And what do I get in return? Your mother's house, your inheritance. Everything that should have been yours in the first place." Vincent felt something twist in his chest. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "How do I know this isn't a setup?" "You don't." Mr. Cross shrugged. "But you don't have a lot of choices, do you? The police are investigating you. Your mother has protection, and those bikers aren't going anywhere." He paused. "Unless someone makes them." Vincent thought about the humiliation of last night, the way his hired men had scattered, the way Marcus had looked at him like he was nothing, like he was less than nothing. "What do you need to know?" 3 days passed. Eleanor was healing slowly but steadily. The color had returned to her face, and she'd started eating regular meals again. Her heart medication was working, and the cough that had racked her body in the cellar had finally subsided. But she wasn't the same woman she'd been before. Something had changed in her. A hardness had crept into her eyes, a wariness that hadn't been there before Vincent came back into her life. Lucas noticed it. He noticed everything. "Grandma," he said one afternoon, finding her standing at the window, staring out at nothing. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you okay?" Eleanor turned to look at him. For a moment she seemed far away, lost in thoughts she couldn't share. Then she smiled, and it almost reached her eyes. I'm okay. I was just thinking. About what? About the future. About what happens next. Lucas came to stand beside her, his small hand slipping into hers. Marcus says we're safe now. I know. Do you believe him? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I want to believe him. I want to believe that this is over, that Vincent won't come back, that everything will be fine. She squeezed his hand. But I've learned that wanting something doesn't make it true. Then what do? We stay careful. We stay together. And we trust the people who've shown us they can be trusted. Lucas nodded, accepting this. Then he said, I like Marcus. I know you do. He reminds me of Grandpa sometimes. Not the way he looks, just the way he makes me feel safe. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Lucas into a hug, holding him tight. Your grandfather would have liked him too. That evening, Marcus called a meeting in the living room. Danny Cole Big Ray and two other bikers named Pete and Jose had gathered around, their faces serious. We've got a problem, Marcus said. I got word from a contact that Vincent's been seen with someone, a man named Cross. Danny's expression darkened. Cross, you sure? Sure enough to be worried. Who's Cross? Cole asked. Trouble, Danny said. He runs a crew out of Cleveland, drugs, extortion, the whole package. We had a run-in with some of his people a few years back. It didn't end well for them. Which means he's got a grudge, Marcus said, and Vincent just gave him an excuse to act on it. Eleanor, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. What does this mean? Marcus looked at her. There was no point in sugarcoating it. It means Vincent isn't working alone anymore. He's got backing, real backing, and that makes him dangerous in ways he wasn't before. So what do? We prepare. We reach out to some friends, and we make sure Cross knows that coming after you isn't worth the cost. How do you make someone like that understand that? Marcus met her eyes. By speaking the only language he understands. 2 nights later, the attack came. It was just after 2 a.m. Pete was on watch, sitting in his truck across the street from Eleanor's house. He'd been there for 4 hours, drinking coffee and fighting off sleep, when he noticed movement at the end of the block. A van. Moving slow. No headlights. Pete reached for his radio. Marcus, we've got company. The response came immediately. How many? Can't tell yet. 1 van. Coming in dark. Hold position. Backup's on the way. Pete watched as the van stopped 2 houses down. The back doors opened and figures emerged. 4, 5, 6 of them. They moved in formation, spreading out as they approached Eleanor's house. These weren't drunk hired thugs. These were professionals. Pete's hand moved to his gun. Marcus, we've got 6 hostiles. They're organized. This isn't like last time. I'm 2 minutes out. Don't engage unless you have to. But Pete didn't have 2 minutes. One of the men had spotted his truck. They were coming toward him now, 2 of them breaking off from the main group. Pete stepped out of his vehicle, his hand on his weapon. That's far enough. The first man didn't slow down. He pulled something from his jacket, and Pete caught the glint of metal. Pete drew his gun. I said that's enough. The man stopped. Behind him, the second one circled to the side, trying to flank Pete's position. You're making a mistake, Pete said. You have no idea what you're walking into. We know exactly what we're walking into, the first man said. His voice was calm, almost bored. 2 bikers. An old woman, a kid. Hardly worth our time, but a job's a job. There's more than 2 of us. Sure there are. The man smiled. Where are they then? The roar of engines answered him. Headlights flooded the street as 6 motorcycles came around the corner, moving fast. The men froze, suddenly caught between Pete and the approaching reinforcements. Marcus was at the front, his bike skidding to a stop just feet from the lead attacker. He was off the motorcycle before it had fully stopped moving with a speed that belied his age. "You picked the wrong house." The attacker's smile faded. He looked at his partner, then at the bikers surrounding them, then back at Marcus. "This isn't over." "No," Marcus agreed. "It isn't. But you're going to leave now, and you're going to tell Cross that if he wants a war, he's got one." For a moment, the air crackled with tension. Then the lead attacker raised his hand, signaling his men to fall back. They retreated to the van, moving quickly, but not running. Pride wouldn't let them run. As the van pulled away, Marcus turned to find Eleanor standing on the front porch, Lucas beside her. "Inside," he said. "Both of you. Now." An hour later, the house was full of bikers. 12 of them now, with more on the way. Marcus had called in every favor he had, reaching out to chapters in neighboring towns, to old friends who'd retired from the life, to anyone who owed him or believed in what they were doing. "This is bigger than Vincent," Danny said quietly, pulling Marcus aside. "Cross doesn't do anything small. If he's involved, he's planning something." "I know." "So what's our play?" Marcus thought about it. He thought about Eleanor, who'd already survived more than anyone should have to. He thought about Lucas, who'd walked into a garage full of strangers because he loved his grandmother more than he feared anything else. "We end this," Marcus said. "Not by waiting for them to come to us, by taking the fight to them. And Vincent's the key. Without him, Cross has no reason to be here. We take Vincent out of the equation, Cross loses his justification." Danny nodded slowly. "You're talking about turning Vincent in, making sure the case against him is airtight. I'm talking about making sure he goes to prison for a very long time. And I'm talking about making sure Cross knows that whatever Vincent promised him isn't worth the trouble we'll bring." "How do we do that?" Marcus smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. "I have an idea." The next morning, Marcus went to see Sergeant Reyes. She looked surprised to find him at the station, but she led him to her office without comment. Once the door was closed, Marcus laid out everything he knew. Cross, the attack, Vincent's involvement. "You're saying this is organized crime?" Reyes asked. "I'm saying Vincent made a deal with the devil and now the devil is coming to collect." Reyes leaned back in her chair. "Even if everything you're telling me is true, I can't just arrest Cross on your word." "You don't have to arrest Cross. Arrest Vincent." "On what charges?" "The ones you already have. Financial exploitation, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment." Marcus paused. "And conspiracy to commit assault." "Conspiracy? Those men last night didn't come on their own. Someone sent them. Someone gave them the address, told them when to come, what to expect. That someone was Vincent." Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll need evidence." "I'll get you evidence. And if Cross retaliates..." Marcus met her eyes. "That's not your problem. That's mine." It took 2 days to build the case. Marcus and his contacts worked around the clock, digging into Vincent's phone records, his bank statements, his communications with Cross. They found texts, voicemails, money transfers, everything pointing to a coordinated plan to intimidate Eleanor into silence and drive away her protectors. When Marcus brought the evidence to Sergeant Reyes, her expression hardened. "This is enough," she said. "More than enough." "Then arrest him." "I will. Today." Marcus nodded. He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing." "What?" "When you arrest him, make sure it's public. Make sure Cross sees it. Make sure everyone sees it." Reyes studied him for a moment. Then she smiled grimly. "You want to send a message?" I want to end this." Vincent was arrested at 4:17 p.m. in the parking lot of the motel where he'd been staying. 3 police cars surrounded him. Officers drew their weapons. The whole thing was over in less than 2 minutes. But Marcus had made sure people were watching. Bikers stationed nearby. Witnesses who would report back to Cross. By the time Vincent was in handcuffs, half the town knew about it. And so did Cross. That evening, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. "You think you've won?" The voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "Mr. Cross." "I think your puppet is in a jail cell," Marcus said. "I think your excuse for being here just disappeared. And I think you're smart enough to know when to cut your losses. You don't know anything about me. I know you're a businessman. And I know this business isn't profitable anymore. Vincent's going to prison. Eleanor's protected. And if you come after any of us, every law enforcement agency in 3 states is going to be very interested in your organization." Silence on the other end. Marcus waited. "You've made an enemy today," Cross finally said. "I've made a lot of enemies. I'm still here." Marcus paused. "Walk away, Cross. There's nothing for you here." The line went dead. Marcus stood on Eleanor's porch watching the sunset. Behind him, he could hear Lucas laughing at something Danny had said. Eleanor was in the kitchen making dinner for the first time in over a week. The house smelled like roasted chicken and warmth and something that felt almost like hope. Danny came out to join him. "You think Cross will back off?" "For now. He's not stupid. The risk isn't worth it without Vincent to justify his involvement. And if he doesn't," Marcus looked at his friend, "then we'll handle it, the way we handle everything." Danny nodded. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange and pink. "The kid asked me something today," Danny said. "What?" "He asked if he could learn to fix motorcycles." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to ask you." Marcus thought about Lucas. 8 years old. He'd been through more in the past week than most people experienced in a lifetime, and instead of being broken by it, he was asking to learn, asking to be part of something. "I'll think about it," Marcus said, but they both knew what his answer would be. Inside, Eleanor set the table while Lucas carried plates from the kitchen. He was careful, deliberate, treating each dish like it was precious. "You're a good helper," Eleanor said. "I like helping." She smiled at him, and this time it reached her eyes. "I know you do." "Grandma." "Yes. Are we going to be okay now?" Eleanor looked at her grandson, at the hope in his eyes, at the fear underneath it. She thought about everything they'd been through. The cellar. The threats. The long nights wondering if anyone would come to help. And then she thought about the people sitting in her living room. The bikers who'd shown up without hesitation, who'd stayed without expectation, who'd fought for her and Lucas when they had no reason to. "Yes," she said. "We're going to be okay. Promise, promise." Lucas hugged her, then wrapping his small arms around her waist and holding on tight. Eleanor held him back, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence. They had survived. Against everything, they had survived. And whatever came next, they wouldn't face it alone. The trial was set for 3 months away. Vincent faced multiple charges, each carrying significant prison time. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor refused. The evidence was too strong, the crimes too serious. In his jail cell, Vincent stared at the ceiling and thought about everything he'd lost. His mother's trust, his freedom, the $28,000 that had vanished into bottles and bad decisions. He thought about Lucas, the nephew, who'd walked 4 blocks to save a woman Vincent had thrown away. He thought about the look in his mother's eyes when she'd told him her house wasn't his anymore. And he thought about Marcus Sullivan, the biker who'd destroyed everything. Hatred burned in his chest, hot and consuming. This wasn't over. It couldn't be over. When he got out, if he got out, he would find a way to make them pay. All of them. But in Eleanor's house, no one was thinking about Vincent anymore. They were thinking about dinner, about laughter, about the strange and wonderful family that had formed around them. Marcus sat at the table with Lucas beside him, listening to the boy explain how carburetors worked. He'd been studying reading books from the library, watching videos online. His enthusiasm was infectious. "And then the fuel mixes with air in the chamber," Lucas said, his eyes bright. "That's what creates the combustion." "You've been doing your homework," Marcus said. "I want to learn everything." "Why?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you saved my grandma, and someday I want to be able to help people the way you helped us." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He looked at Eleanor, who was watching them with tears in her eyes. "That's a good reason," Marcus said finally. "The best reason." The courtroom was packed. Eleanor sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. Lucas was beside her, wearing a button-down shirt that Marcus had bought him for the occasion. The boy kept glancing at the door, waiting for the moment his uncle would be brought in. "You don't have to be here," Eleanor whispered. "You can wait outside." "No." Lucas's voice was firm. "I want to see." Eleanor didn't argue. She understood. After everything they'd been through, Lucas needed to see this end. He needed to know that the monster who'd locked his grandmother in a cellar would face consequences. The door opened, and Vincent was led in by 2 guards. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost weight in the 3 months since his arrest. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He looked broken. But when his gaze found Eleanor, something flickered in those hollow eyes. Anger. Resentment. The same poison that had been there all along, just buried deeper now. Eleanor didn't look away. She held his stare until Vincent was forced to turn and face the judge. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecutor was methodical, building the case piece by piece. Bank records showing the stolen money. Phone records showing Vincent's communication with Cross. Medical records documenting Eleanor's condition when she was found. Testimony from Sergeant Reyes, from the bikers, from neighbors who'd noticed something was wrong but hadn't known what to do. And then there was Lucas. When the prosecutor called his name, the courtroom went silent. Eleanor's hand found Marcus's, gripping it tight. She hadn't wanted Lucas to testify, had fought against it, but the prosecutor had insisted. Lucas's testimony was crucial. The boy walked to the witness stand with steady steps. He looked small up there, dwarfed by the wooden box and the looming figure of the judge, but his voice was clear when he swore to tell the truth. "Lucas," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell us what happened on the night your grandmother was taken to the cellar?" Lucas took a breath. "I was in my room. I heard yelling. My uncle and my grandma were fighting." "What were they fighting about?" "Money. She said he took her money. He said she was crazy." Lucas paused. "Then I heard something crash, and my grandma screamed." "What did you do?" "I ran downstairs. My uncle was dragging her toward the cellar door. She was trying to fight, but she's not strong. He's bigger than her." "Did your uncle see you?" "Yes." Lucas's voice wavered for the first time. "He told me to go back to my room. He said if I told anyone he'd send me away forever. He said no one would believe me anyway." And what happened to your grandmother? He locked her in the cellar. I heard the padlock click. Lucas's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. She was down there for 4 days. I could hear her crying at night. I brought her water when I could, but it wasn't enough. She got sicker and sicker. The courtroom was absolutely still. Even the judge had leaned forward, his expression grave. "Why didn't you call the police?" the prosecutor asked. "I was scared. My uncle said no one would help. He said they'd put my grandma in a home and send me to foster care and I'd never see her again." Lucas's voice cracked. "But then she got so sick she couldn't breathe. I knew if I didn't do something she was going to die." "So what did you do?" Lucas lifted his chin. "I went to find help. I found the bikers." "And they helped you?" "They saved her." Now the tears did fall, streaming down his cheeks. "They saved both of us." Vincent's lawyer tried to paint a different picture. He argued that Vincent had been under stress, that he'd been struggling with addiction, that he'd never intended to hurt anyone. He suggested that Eleanor's memory was unreliable, that the bikers had their own agenda, that the whole situation had been blown out of proportion. But when Vincent took the stand in his own defense, everything fell apart. "Mr. Bennett," his lawyer said carefully, "can you explain your relationship with your mother?" Vincent looked at Eleanor. Something ugly crossed his face before he could control it. "My mother and I have had our differences. She's always been difficult. After my father left, she made my life hell." "Objection," the prosecutor said. "Relevance." "I'll allow it," the judge said. "But get to the point, counselor." Vincent's lawyer nodded. "Mr. Bennett, did you lock your mother in the cellar?" "I was trying to protect her." "Protect her from what?" "From herself. She was making wild accusations, threatening to call the police about things that never happened. I thought if she just had some time to calm down, so you admit you locked her in the cellar." Vincent hesitated. His lawyer's face went pale. That wasn't the answer they'd rehearsed. "I was helping her," Vincent said stubbornly. "She needed to understand, Mr. Bennett." The prosecutor stood. "You just admitted under oath that you locked your 68-year-old mother in a cellar. Is that correct?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." The prosecutor held up a document. "According to medical records, your mother was found severely dehydrated, malnourished, and without her heart medication for 4 days. She could have died." "I didn't know she was that sick." "You didn't check on her once in 4 days." I was dealing with things." "What things?" Vincent didn't answer. "Were you dealing with Mr. Cross-planning an attack on the people protecting your mother?" Vincent's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. Withdrawn." The prosecutor smiled slightly. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Eleanor spent that time in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, Marcus and Lucas by her side. She couldn't eat. She couldn't read the magazines scattered on the table. She could only sit and wait and pray. "What if they let him go?" Lucas asked quietly. "They won't," Marcus said. "But what if they do?" Marcus looked at the boy. "Then we'll deal with it. The same way we've dealt with everything else. Together, together." Lucas nodded, accepting this. He reached for Eleanor's hand, and she squeezed it tight. The door opened. A court officer stepped in. "They've reached a verdict." The courtroom fell silent as the jury foreman stood. "On the count of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, how do you find guilty?" Eleanor's breath caught. "On the count of unlawful imprisonment, guilty." Lucas gripped her hand tighter. On the count of child endangerment, guilty. A sob escaped Eleanor's throat. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. On the count of conspiracy to commit assault, guilty. Vincent sat motionless at the defense table. His face had gone gray. His lawyer was whispering something to him, but Vincent didn't seem to hear. The judge nodded. The defendant will be remanded to custody pending sentencing. Court is adjourned. As the guards moved to take Vincent away, he turned and looked at Eleanor. For a long moment, mother and son stared at each other across the courtroom. "You did this," Vincent said, his voice carrying in the silence. "You destroyed your own son." Eleanor stood slowly. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "No, Vincent. You destroyed yourself. The moment you chose money over family. The moment you locked me in that cellar. The moment you threatened Lucas." She paused. "I loved you. I wanted to save you. But some people don't want to be saved." Vincent's face contorted. He opened his mouth to say something else, but the guards pulled him away before he could speak. The door closed behind him, and he was gone. Eleanor sat back down heavily. Lucas wrapped his arms around her, and she held him close, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." 2 weeks later, Vincent was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The judge cited the severity of his crimes, the vulnerability of his victims, and his complete lack of remorse. Eleanor was there for the sentencing, but she didn't speak. She'd said everything she needed to say. Afterward, she stood on the courthouse steps with Marcus Lucas and the bikers who'd become her family. The sun was shining. A light breeze carried the scent of spring. "What happens now?" Danny asked. Marcus looked at Eleanor. "That's up to her." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She thought about the house where she'd lived for 40 years, where she'd raised her children, where she'd nursed her husband through his final illness. She thought about the cellar, about the darkness, and the cold, and the fear. And then she thought about the future. "I want to go home," she said. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "After everything that happened there, it's my home. Vincent tried to take it from me, but he failed." She lifted her chin. "I'm not going to let him win by being afraid of my own house." Marcus smiled. "Then let's go home." The next few months were a time of healing. Eleanor started seeing a therapist working through the trauma of what she'd experienced. It wasn't easy. There were nights when she woke up screaming, convinced she was back in the cellar. There were days when she couldn't stop crying when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. But she kept going. For Lucas. For herself. Lucas, meanwhile, had become a fixture at the Iron Guardian's garage. He was there every afternoon after school, learning about engines and tools, and the 1,000 small skills that went into keeping a motorcycle running. The bikers had adopted him as their unofficial mascot, teaching him not just about bikes, but about life. "You're getting good at this," Marcus said one afternoon, watching Lucas adjust a carburetor with steady hands. "You think so?" "I know so. Another year or two, you'll be better than half the guys here." Lucas grinned, his face smeared with grease. "That's because I have a good teacher." Marcus ruffled his hair. "Don't get cocky." But he was proud. Proud of the boy Lucas was becoming. Proud of the courage he'd shown when it mattered most. Proud to be part of his life. 6 months after the trial, Eleanor received a letter. It was from Vincent. She stared at the envelope for a long time, her hands trembling. Part of her wanted to throw it away unopened. Part of her wanted to burn it. But another part, the part that still remembered the little boy who'd brought her flowers from the garden, needed to know what he had to say. She opened it. The letter was short. just a few paragraphs written in Vincent's cramped handwriting. Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I'm in prison. Because I finally understand what I did. I had everything, a mother who loved me, a nephew who looked up to me, a chance to be part of a family, and I threw it all away. I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the pain I caused, but I can try to be better. I don't expect you to believe me. I just wanted you to know. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she kept the letter because some part of her still hoped that the little boy she remembered was still in there somewhere, buried under years of pain and bad choices. Some part of her still hoped. A year after the trial, Eleanor's house had transformed. The paint was fresh. The garden restored, the windows gleaming in the sunlight. Neighbors who'd kept their distance before now stopped by regularly, bringing food and friendship, and the kind of community Eleanor had almost forgotten existed. And the bikers were still there, not standing guard anymore, but visiting, having dinner, becoming family. On the anniversary of the day Lucas had walked into the garage, Marcus showed up with a gift. "What's this?" Lucas asked, staring at the wrapped package. "Open it." Lucas tore off the paper and found a leather jacket inside. It was smaller than the ones the bikers wore, but unmistakably the same style. The club's patch was sewn onto the back. "This is for you," Marcus said. "But you're not wearing it yet." "Why not?" "Because it has to be earned. This jacket means something. It means you're part of a family that looks out for each other, that stands up for what's right, that doesn't back down when things get hard." He paused. "You've already shown you have that in you, but there's still more to learn." Lucas held the jacket like it was made of gold. "How do I earn it? By being the person you're becoming. By never forgetting what it means to ask for help when you need it. By being there for others the way we were there for you." Lucas nodded slowly. "I can do that. I know you can." Eleanor watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of something that felt almost like joy. That night, after everyone had gone home and Lucas was asleep, Eleanor sat on the porch with Marcus. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "I never thanked you properly," Eleanor said. "You've thanked me 100 times. Words aren't enough. What you did for us, what you're still doing." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you know why I helped you that first day? You said someone helped you once. That's part of it, but there's more." He paused. "When Lucas walked into that garage, I saw something in his eyes. Fear, sure, but also determination, courage. He wasn't asking for someone to save him. He was asking for help to save someone else." Marcus turned to look at her. "That's rare. Most people spend their whole lives never finding that kind of love. Your grandson found it at 8 years old." Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears. "He's special." "He is. And so are you." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "What happened to you was terrible. No one should have to go through what you went through. But you survived. You fought back. And you're still here. Still standing, still loving that boy with everything you have. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You would have found a way. People like you always do." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "You're a good man, Marcus Sullivan." I'm a man who got a second chance, and I'm trying to use it well." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The night was peaceful, calm, safe. Eleanor thought about everything they'd been through. The cellar, the trial, the long months of healing. And she thought about the future stretching out before them, full of possibility. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Whatever we want." 10 years had passed since Lucas Bennett walked into the Iron Guardian's garage with tears streaming down his face. He was 18 now, tall and broad-shouldered, with hands that knew the weight of tools and the feel of engines. His movements were confident, practiced, the result of a decade spent learning from men who'd become his family. Lucas stood in the center of the shop, adjusting the timing on a vintage Harley. His shirt was stained with grease, his forearms strong from years of work. When he glanced up to check the manual on the workbench, his eyes held a steadiness that hadn't been there when he was 8. Marcus walked over slower now than he used to be. His beard had gone completely gray, and his joints ached on cold mornings. But his presence was the same. Solid, dependable. "How's it looking?" Marcus asked. Lucas straightened, rolling his shoulders. "Timing was off by half a degree. Fixed it. She'll run smooth now." "Good. Owner's picking it up tomorrow." "I know. I'll do a final check in the morning." Marcus studied him for a long moment. The boy who'd walked into this garage a decade ago was gone. In his place stood a man who'd earned every callus on his hands, every scar on his knuckles, every ounce of respect the club had given him. "You've come a long way, kid." Lucas glanced at him, then looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "You taught me everything." "I taught you how to work with your hands," Marcus said. "The rest was all you." Later that evening, after the shop had closed, Lucas rode through town on his own bike. He'd built it himself, piece by piece, over the course of 2 years. Marcus had supervised, offering guidance when asked, but the work had been Lucas's. The streets were familiar in a way that felt both grounding and bittersweet. He passed the elementary school he'd attended, the corner store where his grandmother used to buy groceries, the park where he'd spent afternoons after his grandfather died. He turned onto his street and slowed as he approached the house. It looked better than it had 10 years ago. Fresh paint, new porch railing, flowers along the walkway. Eleanor had taken pride in it again, and it showed. Lucas parked in the driveway and walked up to the front door. Before he could knock, it swung open. Eleanor stood there, 78 years old now, her hair completely white, but her eyes still sharp. She smiled when she saw him. "You're late." "Traffic," Lucas grinned. She swatted his arm playfully. "Dinner's almost ready. Go wash your hands." The house smelled like roasted chicken and vegetables. As Lucas walked to the bathroom, he noticed the changes Eleanor had made over the years. New curtains, framed photos on the walls, a bookshelf filled with novels she'd been slowly working through. The house felt lived in, loved. When he returned to the kitchen, Eleanor was setting plates on the table. Lucas grabbed the water pitcher and filled 2 glasses. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy. Fixed 3 bikes, started on a 4th. Marcus says I'm getting faster." Eleanor sat down, smoothing her napkin across her lap. "You've always been good with your hands. Your grandfather was the same way." Lucas smiled. "I wish I'd known him better." "He would have loved you," Eleanor said softly. "And he would have been so proud of the man you've become." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only existed between people who'd been through something together and come out stronger on the other side. Eventually, Eleanor set down her fork. "Marcus stopped by earlier." Lucas glanced up. "Yeah. What did he want?" "He wanted to talk to you, but he said he'd wait until tonight." Lucas frowned slightly. "Did he say what it was about?" Eleanor's smile was knowing. "I think you already know." After dinner, Lucas rode back to the garage. The lot was empty except for Marcus's bike parked near the entrance. The lights were still on. When Lucas walked inside, he found Marcus sitting on a stool near the workbench, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Hey," Lucas said, closing the door behind him. Marcus looked up. "Hey, thanks for coming back." Lucas walked over, his hands in his pockets. "Grandma said you wanted to talk." Marcus nodded. He set the wrapped object on the workbench and unfolded the cloth, slowly revealing a leather jacket. It was the same one he'd given Lucas 10 years ago. The one with the club's patch on the back. The one Lucas had kept safe, but never worn. "I told you a long time ago that you'd know when you were ready," Marcus said. "I think that time is now." Lucas stared at the jacket, his throat suddenly tight. "You've earned it," Marcus continued. "Not because you've been here for 10 years, not because you're good at what you do, though you are. You've earned it because you understand what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." "Marcus, you've been protecting your grandmother, helping people in this community, showing up when it mattered." He paused. "That's what this jacket represents." Lucas reached out and touched the leather, his fingers tracing the edge of the patch. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just put it on." Lucas picked up the jacket and slipped his arms through the sleeves. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for him all along. He turned to face Marcus, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Marcus stood and clapped a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Welcome to the family." Lucas's eyes burned, but he didn't look away. "Thank you. For everything. You would have done the same for me." And Lucas realized, standing there in the jacket he'd waited a decade to wear, that Marcus was right. He would have. The next Saturday, the club held a ceremony at the garage. It wasn't elaborate. Just the core members, a few friends, and Eleanor, who sat in a folding chair near the front, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes glistening with pride. Marcus stood at the center of the room, addressing the group. 10 years ago, a kid walked into this shop and asked for help. He didn't know us. We didn't know him. But he trusted us anyway, and that trust changed everything. He turned to Lucas, who stood beside him, wearing the jacket. "Lucas Bennett has proven himself not just as a mechanic, but as a brother. He's earned his place here, and from this day forward he's one of us." The room erupted in applause. Danny stepped forward and handed Lucas a small metal pin, the club's emblem. Lucas took it carefully, then pinned it to the front of his jacket. Eleanor stood. The room quieted. She walked over to Lucas, her steps slow but steady, and placed both hands on his face. "I am so proud of you," she said, her voice breaking. "Your grandfather would be too." Lucas leaned down and hugged her, and the room stayed silent, giving them that moment. The months that followed were busy ones. Lucas continued working at the garage, but he also started taking on other responsibilities. He helped single mothers fix their cars for free. He taught kids in the neighborhood basic mechanics. He volunteered at the community center, where his grandmother had worked for years. One afternoon, a woman came into the shop with her 10-year-old daughter. The woman looked exhausted, her clothes worn, her face lined with worry. She explained that her car had broken down and she couldn't afford the repair. Without it, she couldn't get to work. Lucas listened, then nodded. "Leave it with me. I'll take care of it." The woman's eyes widened. "I can't pay you right now, but I can. You don't have to pay me." She stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "Why would you do that?" Lucas glanced at the jacket hanging on the wall, then back at her. "Because someone did it for me once." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. Just come back in 2 days." After she left, Danny walked over. "You're turning into Marcus, you know that." Lucas smiled. "There are worse things to be." 3 years later, Eleanor turned 81. The party was held at her house, the yard filled with neighbors and friends and bikers who'd become family. There was food and music and laughter, the kind of celebration that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. Lucas watched his grandmother move through the crowd, accepting hugs and well wishes with the grace of someone who'd learned to accept love after years of doing without it. Marcus stood beside him, a cup of punch in his hand. "She looks happy," Marcus said. "She is happy." Lucas paused. "We both are. You've built a good life, kid. We built it together." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I got a call yesterday, from Vincent's parole officer." Lucas tensed. "What did they want?" "He's up for release next month. Good behavior. They wanted to know if there were any concerns." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that as long as he stays away from Eleanor and you, there won't be any problems." Lucas processed this. He'd spent years trying not to think about his uncle, about the man who'd locked his grandmother in a cellar and threatened to send him to foster care. The anger was still there, buried deep, but it didn't control him anymore. "What if he doesn't stay away?" Marcus looked at him. "Then we'll deal with it, the same way we've dealt with everything else. Together. Always." Vincent was released on a Tuesday morning. He walked out of the prison gates with nothing but the clothes on his back and a bus ticket to Columbus. He didn't look back. He'd spent 7 years thinking about what he'd lost. His mother's trust. His freedom. The money that had vanished into bottles and bad decisions. But mostly he'd thought about the bikers. About Marcus Sullivan. About the way they'd destroyed everything he'd built. For the first 3 years, hatred had consumed him. He'd lain awake at night planning revenge, imagining scenarios where he came back stronger, meaner, ready to take back what was his. But somewhere around year 4, something had shifted. Maybe it was the therapy the prison offered. Maybe it was the letters from his mother that he never answered, but always read. Maybe it was just time wearing down the sharp edges of his rage. He didn't want revenge anymore. He just wanted peace. The bus to Columbus left at noon. Vincent found a seat near the back and stared out the window as the town where he'd grown up disappeared behind him. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to make amends for what he'd done. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was never going back. Eleanor received a letter 2 weeks after Vincent's release. This one was different from the others. Longer, more honest. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I probably never will. But I wanted you to know that I'm not coming back. Not to hurt you. Not to cause trouble. Not for any reason. The man who locked you in that cellar doesn't exist anymore. I killed him. It took 7 years, but I killed him. I'm going to try to build something new, something better. I don't expect you to believe me. I just wanted you to know. I love you. I always have. I just forgot how to show it." Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the drawer with the others. She still didn't write back. But for the first time in 10 years, she felt something other than fear and anger when she thought about her son. She felt hope. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Lucas walked into the Iron Guardian's garage. He and Eleanor sat on the porch together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, they could hear the rumble of motorcycles heading out for an evening ride. "Do you ever think about that day?" Eleanor asked. "All the time." "Any regrets?" Lucas considered the question. He thought about everything that had happened since: the fear, the trials, the long years of healing, the family he'd found in a group of rough-looking men with hearts bigger than anyone gave them credit for. "No," he said finally. "Not one." Eleanor smiled. "Me neither." "Really? Not even about Vincent?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I regret what he became. I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret the years I spent being afraid." She paused. "But I don't regret how things turned out. Because if none of that had happened, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be the man you are. And I wouldn't have learned what it means to be truly loved." Lucas reached over and took her hand. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the stars begin to appear. The night was warm, peaceful, full of the kind of quiet that only comes after storms have passed. "Lucas," Eleanor said after a while. "Yeah. Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. For walking into that garage when you were just 8 years old and asking strangers for help. For being brave when I couldn't be." Lucas squeezed her hand. "You saved yourself, Grandma. I just got you started." Eleanor laughed softly. "We saved each other then?" "Yeah." Lucas smiled. "We did." The next morning, Lucas arrived at the garage early. Marcus was already there working on an old engine that had been giving them trouble for weeks. He looked up when Lucas walked in. "You're here early. Couldn't sleep. Everything okay?" Lucas nodded. He walked over and picked up a wrench, joining Marcus at the workbench. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of metal and the hum of the radio in the corner. "Marcus," Lucas said eventually. "Yeah, I've been thinking about something." "About what?" Lucas set down the wrench and turned to face him. "About what comes next. About what I want to do with my life." Marcus straightened, giving him his full attention. "And what have you decided?" "I want to help kids. Kids like I was. Kids who are scared and alone and don't know where to turn." Lucas paused. "I want to start a program. Something that teaches them skills, gives them a place to belong, shows them that they matter." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the proudest smile Lucas had ever seen. "That's a hell of an idea, kid." "You think so?" "I know so, and I think your grandfather would be proud." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "Will you help me? What do you think?" Lucas already knew the answer. He'd known it before he asked. Because that's what family did. They showed up. They helped. They stood by each other through everything, no matter how hard things got. That's what the Iron Guardians had taught him. That's what Marcus had taught him. And that's what he would teach the next generation. 1 year later, the Lucas Bennett Youth Center opened its doors. It was a modest building, funded by donations from the Iron Guardians and the community that had rallied around Eleanor and Lucas a decade ago. Inside, there were workbenches and tools, classrooms, and counseling rooms, everything a kid needed to learn that they weren't alone. On opening day, Lucas stood at the entrance watching families stream through the doors. Kids of all ages, some scared, some curious, some just looking for a place to belong. Eleanor was there, sitting in a chair near the front, her face glowing with pride. Marcus stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You did this?" Eleanor said, looking up at Lucas. "We did this." "No." She shook her head firmly. "You did this. Everything that happened, all the pain and fear and darkness, you turned it into something beautiful. Something that will help people for generations." Lucas knelt down beside her chair. "I learned from the best." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands the way she used to when he was small. "I am so proud of you, so incredibly proud." "I know, Grandma. I know." That night, after the center had closed and everyone had gone home, Lucas stood alone in the main room. He looked around at the workbenches and tools, at the posters on the walls, showing kids they'd already helped, at the photos of the Iron Guardians who'd made this possible. And he thought about an 8-year-old boy who'd walked into a garage full of strangers, tears streaming down his face, screaming, "Please, save my grandmother." That boy was gone now. In his place stood a man who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was being afraid and acting anyway. It was asking for help when you needed it. It was standing up for the people you loved, no matter the cost. Lucas walked to the window and looked out at the night sky. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably at the garage, working on another engine. Eleanor was probably at home reading one of her novels. And somewhere maybe Vincent was building a new life, trying to become someone better. The world was full of broken people, full of pain and fear and darkness. But it was also full of hope, full of love, full of people who showed up when it mattered most. Lucas had learned that lesson when he was 8 years old, standing in a garage surrounded by bikers who had no reason to help him, but did anyway. And now, every day for the rest of his life, he would pass that lesson on. Because sometimes saving one life gives you another. Sometimes the family you choose is the one that chooses you back. And sometimes a scared little boy crying out for help becomes the man who answers that call for others. That was the transformation. That was the miracle. And it all started with 4 words: "Please save my grandmother." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? You're part of this family now.